Naruto exclusive videos lemon come out on my boosty. You can watch and subscribe. Link in the description. Enjoy watching. Description: Naruto was a wanted child, but not the only one. Jiya Uzumaki is the older sister of the Jinchuriki, and after the death of their parents, she raises her brother alone. How will history change? Chapter 1. A little red-haired girl ran down the street, weaving between people scurrying back and forth. The adults paid absolutely no attention to her, only a few smiled at her, but then forgot about her, returning to their own affairs. Jiya Uzumaki is 9 years old, with beautiful blue eyes like her father and red hair like her mother. Jiya is the daughter of the 4th Hokage and his wife, Uzumaki Kushina. The girl bumped into someone and jumped back. Sorry. I didn't mean to. Oh, hello, Kakashi-san. She looked at him guiltily. It's okay, Jiya. Are you in a hurry to get home? It wasn't noticeable under the mask, but Kakashi smiled. Yes. Mom promised that we would go pick out things together. Jiya jumped up impatiently. You'll be a big sister soon. Are you waiting? Kakashi asked politely. Of course. Kakashi-san, when will you come help with the crib? You promised. Jiya pouted slightly. Ma, that's right. I'll come tomorrow evening, but on one condition. He narrowed his one visible eye. What kind? You will stop calling me Kakashi-san. My name is Kakashi. Okay. See you tomorrow, Kakashi, don't be late. Jiya waved her hand. See you tomorrow. It was the evening of October 9th. The morning of October 11th was rainy and cold. The village was plunged into silence. In place of some houses there were gaping emptinesses. The shopping streets, previously noisy, cheerful, overcrowded with people, were striking in their emptiness. People dressed in black came out of their houses and slowly walked to the village cemetery. A great sorrow came to Konoha. The nine-tailed demon fox attacked the village and took many lives. Only a miracle saved Konoha from complete destruction. Today, the villagers buried their beloved relatives, friends, neighbors. They buried the 4th Hokage. The hospital was overcrowded with victims, and only the department where the newborns were kept was almost empty. Jiya walked from door to door, looking around anxiously. Suddenly, someone grabbed her hand. Girl, what are you doing here? The stranger looked displeased. The last thing he needed was strange children here. I came to pick up my little brother. Jiya tried to pull her hand away, but she couldn't. Where are your parents? They're gone. They died, Jiya said, slightly hesitating. And he took the parents of such a sweet girl. The doctor sighed heavily. What is your brother's name? Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. There. The stranger said this barely audibly, but in the silence of the corridor it sounded like a bolt from the blue. What? Jiya thought she had misheard. Get out. This is no place for monsters. The medic squeezed her hand tighter and loomed over her. Monster? Who? Another voice came from behind Jiya. What's going on here? Why are you shouting? The voice was quiet, but its owner had no need to shout. Turning around, Jiya saw the 3rd Hokage next to her. Hokage-sama! Children have no place here, especially without adult supervision, but this girl won't leave, the man said indignantly. Jiya, what are you doing here? Why weren't you at the funeral? The village chief's voice was filled with concern. When he realized that the 4th's daughter hadn't come to the funeral, he had sent Anbu to look for her. He wouldn't be able to forgive himself for not protecting the girl. I came to pick up Naruto, Jiya replied, rubbing her wrist. The grip was too strong. The Hokage sighed heavily. Jiya, let's go for a little walk. The Hokage gently pushed the girl towards the exit and turned to the doctor. Get back to work, Karashi. With these words, he left the hospital together with the red-haired girl. As Jiya slowly walked through the village with the 3rd, she realized that Konoha had suffered more destruction than she had realized that morning. The walk from the hospital to the center was filled with oppressive silence. Hokage-sama, what did you want to talk about? Something unpleasant, right? The red-haired girl was the first to break the silence. Why do you think it's unpleasant? It's always better to have serious conversations while walking. Especially if it's a serious and unpleasant conversation. That's what Dad says, or rather said. Tears welled up in his eyes. Not now. Not the time. Well, Minato was right. I do want to discuss you and your brother. Jia's condition did not escape Sarutobi's notice, but he did not show it. I want to take my brother, she repeated stubbornly. Jia, why did that doctor say Naruto was a monster? He was talking about Naruto, right? She lifted her head, trying to see the Hokage's face. I don't know what Hirashi meant. I don't think it was about your brother. He's just had a hard day. We all have. As for you and your brother, Hiruzen cleared his throat. Jia, I'm afraid you can't take Naruto. You're too young to take care of him. Besides, you need someone to look after you yourself. And I don't want to separate you, so you and your brother are going to the orphanage. An orphanage? But Hokage-sama, I'm old enough. Next year I'm graduating from the academy. 2 years earlier than all my classmates. I always helped my mother around the house. And there was no trace of tears left. The main thing now was not to give up and prove my point. Yes, you are very smart and independent for your age, but nevertheless, I cannot allow you to live alone and take care of Naruto. And Jiraiya? He's Dad's teacher. We got our names thanks to him. I know Dad asked him to be Naruto's godfather. Doesn't that mean he should at least take care of him? Jiraiya is out of reach. I'm not sure he knows what happened. I'm sorry. This time the girl couldn't hold back her tears. Hiruzen did send them to the orphanage. Luckily, the creches and senior groups were in the same building, and Jia was able to visit Naruto. Although, in fact, she lived in the creches of the orphanage, spending all her free time there. Sometimes the third Hokage came to see them. At first Kakashi also visited them, but soon he stopped visiting them altogether. There was no news from Jiraiya. Jiu and Naruto were not well liked at the orphanage. At first, the caregivers liked the cute red-haired girl. They knew that she had lost her parents, and they were touched by how often she ran to the other end of the building to see her brother. After a few weeks, all the caregivers at the orphanage knew who her brother was. Monster. Jia heard that word often. She wasn't called that, only Naruto. She spent enough time in the nursery to understand that her brother was being openly neglected. The boy could cry for hours, but no one was in a hurry to find out the reason for the crying. As he grew older, he was punished for almost any sigh. Asked for water? Punished. Laughed loudly? Punished. Had a nightmare? Punished. Injured himself? Cried? Asked to go to the toilet? Punishment followed immediately. Perhaps only thanks to these punishments was it clear that at least someone remembered Naruto's existence. Most of the time, the inhabitants of the orphanage ignored him in vain. This attitude extended to Jia as well. Children, seeing the attitude of adults, tried to bully her, but were always rebuffed. The teachers saw her as the cause of all the troubles, and it was she who received the punishment. No one ever believed a single word she said. Monster. Jia was smart. She graduated from the academy a year earlier than expected. Although she should have become a genin a little earlier, but due to the death of her parents, she needed another year. Even torn between missions, training in Naruto, she noticed that the attitude towards her and her brother was completely undeserved. When she began to go out into the village more often, she saw a similar attitude from other villagers, but she did not understand the reason. Jia asked everyone, the Hokage, the teachers at the academy, the caregivers, teammates, the sellers. All her questions came to a dead end. Chapter 2. Jia was 13 when she received the rank of Chunin. With her skills, she could have gotten it a year or two earlier, but taking care of Naruto took up too much of her time. He was almost 4, and he could already count, read, and talk non-stop. He was best at that last one. Naruto was never discouraged, looking for trouble, and constantly trying to make friends with the other residents of the orphanage. Tried. The attitude towards him at the shelter did not improve. No one wanted to be friends with him, but they were always happy to fight with him. The boy fought clumsily, but often. He learned to hide the consequences of fights so as not to upset his beloved sister. Gia couldn't replace his parents, but she didn't try. She was the one who comforted him, always believed, supported him, explained what was right and wrong, taught him. She was the only one who showed love and care towards the boy. Naruto responded in kind. He remembered everything that happened in the orphanage when Gia went on a mission, ate vegetables, studied diligently, even though he hated sitting around at a desk, and even tried to stay away from trouble, but it found him. When Gia wasn't on a mission, Naruto followed her everywhere like a little tail, and she didn't mind at all. That's how they lived until Naruto was 4. Just the two of them. The day before Naruto's birthday, Gia returned from a mission and didn't find him at the orphanage. The caregivers didn't seem too concerned about this fact, and only shrugged their shoulders when she asked. After turning the entire orphanage upside down, she found him unconscious with his arm twisted unnaturally in the basement, which was never used and was always locked. How did the child get there? A mystery. Without thinking for a minute, the girl carried her brother to the infirmary. The nurse, seeing who was brought to her for examination, immediately announced that there was no appointment today. And then Gia couldn't stand it anymore. Running headlong to the hospital, she managed to get Naruto examined by a doctor by shouting. The doctor on duty recorded the injured limb and said that in addition to the dislocated shoulder, the boy had a concussion and slight frostbite, so he was leaving the child in the hospital for a few days for observation. Apparently, the doctor made the decision to leave the boy in the hospital thanks to the third Hokage, who showed up at the end of the examination. Gia, do you have any idea how Naruto got these injuries? The third asked without wasting time on greetings. He must have gotten into a fight, but I don't know how he ended up in the basement. Gia kept her eyes on her brother. Kami, he's so small. In the basement? I found him there. Her voice was tired. She had been running on adrenaline for the last couple of hours. I see. Hiruzen exhaled smoke and turned his gaze to the window. Gia's voice brought him back to earth. Hokage-sama, let me ask, why do they treat Naruto like this? She asked, looking at the head of the village. You've already asked? More than once. Hiruzen reminded her patiently. Yes, but today I asked this question for the last time. The words sounded too harsh, and Gia herself understood it perfectly well, but a desperate situation required desperate measures. The last one? The third looked at her puzzled. Yes. Either I get an answer, or we leave the village. Do you understand what you're talking about? I'll declare you a missing nin right now. You'll be hunted. Only an idiot wouldn't hear the metal in the village chief's voice, and Gia wasn't an idiot. She's already being led, Hokage-sama, but I don't know the reason. She wasn't going to give and she'd waited long enough. Your parents gave their lives for Konoha. Sarutobi tried to appeal to the voice of reason. Yes, but they gave their lives for us too. This is not the life they wanted for their children. Will you tell me? And don't think that my promise to leave the village is an empty phrase. Then you won't know the answer. I will. You can't be the only one who knows the reason. Your answer? Determination burned in Ji's eyes. Hiruzen knew that look. With it, Konoha shinobi died for their village, their families. This fire was familiar to many and it was impossible to break. He sighed heavily. It's really time for you to know the truth. The silence that reigned in the ward after the third story could be eaten with spoons. So, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Gia exhaled, looking at Naruto lying on the hospital bed. You don't look surprised, Sarutobi noted shrewdly. There aren't many reasons why a 4-year-old boy would be called a monster. Gia shrugged. That's true. The Hokage nodded. Unfortunately, most of the residents don't see the difference between an innocent child and the fox himself. I'll talk to the shelter staff. The guilty. It won't help. It never has. The village. Gia waved toward the window. Its people, the orphanage. They won't stop treating us like this until they see that Naruto and the Nine-Tails aren't the same. Besides, it's only been 4 years. Too soon. They're blinded by grief. I was always surprised by the way you reasoned. Minato claimed that you were more mature and smarter than many of your peers. Hiruzen sighed heavily. I always thought that it was his fatherly pride speaking in him, but he was right. Yes, I believe that over time, the attitude towards Naruto will change for the better. And what about you? What do you mean? Jia asked in surprise. Now you know the truth. Has your attitude towards him changed? No. I found out the truth 5 minutes ago, and he grew up before my eyes. He will always be my loud brother, and then everything else. Good answer. Hiruzen nodded. Hokage-sama, I wanted to ask. Jia began hesitantly. Why did the third still tolerate her rudeness? Yes? Hiruzen took another drag and looked at her expectantly. I want to leave the shelter. With Naruto. Sarutobi said affirmatively. Yes. The third sighed heavily and went to the window. I've been waiting for this request since the moment you received the Chunin vest. Have you decided everything yet? It seemed as if her heart had never beat so fast. Maybe you should wait a couple of years, Hiruzen said, standing with his back to Jia. To be honest, I started planning our move right after the exam. I wanted to move in 6 months, but the situation changed. We can't put it off any longer. I understand. Hiruzen turned away from the window and looked at Jia. Okay. Do you know that your parents still have savings? She shook her head. According to Konoha's laws, I have to give them to you when you come of age, but given your rank and the current situation, you can get them earlier. I believe it will be enough to buy a small apartment and furniture. Jia let out a surprised breath. So much? Your parents didn't spend much money. Besides, if I remember correctly, after Naruto was born, Minato wanted to move to a bigger apartment, so he was saving up money to buy real estate. In the morning, I'll give you all the documents and ask for a list of suitable apartments. Thank you. Jia smiled gratefully. And one more thing. The fact that your brother is a Jinchuriki is known outside of Konoha. Many villages would like to get him for themselves. That's why ANBU will be assigned to him. Suddenly a soft groan was heard from the bed. He's coming too. The third noted and headed for the exit. We'll discuss the rest later. Right now he needs you. Thank you. Sorry for blackmail? Always happy to. But don't try it again. With that he walked out the door. Another groan was heard from the bed. Naruto opened his eyes and immediately noticed Jia. Little sister? He called uncertainly. The room was completely unfamiliar. I'm here. Everything is fine. Jia immediately came over and sat on the edge of the bed. How are you, brother? Naruto's eyes glistened with tears. Why? Why are they doing this to us? I just said I would become a ninja. You will be Naruto. Come here. With that, Jia pulled the boy into a hug, a few tears falling onto her vest. She stroked his back and rocked him gently until the sobs subsided. You shouldn't listen to everything that's said to you. Sometimes people say mean things because they want to hurt us, not because it's the truth. You will become a ninja, but it won't be that easy. You know that, right? Will you help me? Naruto asked quietly. Of course, Jia replied, still stroking his back. If my sister helps me, then I won't just become a shinobi. I'll become Hokage. Naruto smiled dazzlingly. The 5th Hokage, Naruto Uzumaki. Sounds good, Jia said with a laugh, but then she became serious. There's something else I'd like to ask you. We're already old enough. I'm a Chunin, and you'll become Hokage. Yes, the best Hokage in history. Naruto extricated himself from the embrace and victoriously raised his hands to the ceiling. Right. Jia ruffled his hair. What do you say if we move out of the shelter? Just the two of us? Really? Really? Naruto jumped up on the bed, hope shining in his eyes. It's true. Jia intercepted him in another jump and sat him down next to her. Where will we live? Tomorrow Hokage-sama will give me a list of apartments that I can look at. We'll watch them together? Naruto tried to jump up on the bed again, and Gia put her hand on his shoulders. I don't think you'll be released from the hospital tomorrow. She smiled at her brother's attempts to jump up. Where did all this energy come from? But I want to see. Let's do it this way. Tomorrow I'll take the addresses and filter out some of them, and probably the day after tomorrow I'll be able to pick you up for half a day. Agreed? Gia ran her hand through his hair again. Okay, but now you're going to tell me a story. And you're not going anywhere at night. Where would I go? Move. You'll have a fairy tale. Gia didn't even notice how she fell asleep while telling the story. When she woke up in the morning, she found that Naruto had climbed all the way on top of her. Adorable, but it was hard to breathe. Gently moving her brother onto the bed, Gia ran into the shelter, tidied herself up, and went to the Hokage's residence. At the office, she was given a list of potential apartments, including 14 addresses, and a report on her parents' savings. Deciding to thoroughly familiarize herself with what she had received, she sat down on a bench next to the residence. My parents were never spendthrifts. I always knew that, but obviously their salaries were a little higher than I thought. And the third said that there was more than enough money, but still. This money will be enough for more than just an apartment and furniture. I will be able to spend less time outside the village. If I calculate everything correctly, this money will be enough for half a year, and that's not counting my savings. Not bad. Everything is very good. With these thoughts in mind, she began to study the list of potential apartments, and immediately crossed out 3, based on their location. 11 apartments. I have to hurry if I want to see them all. Naruto shouldn't spend the whole day alone. House number 17. House number 17. Who was in charge of numbering the houses? At this rate, I won't make it to Naruto. Gia thought with irritation. In 3 hours, she had managed to inspect 5 apartments, noting 2 for herself. And now she had been unable to find the right house for almost 10 minutes. Some buildings had no numbers at all. Those houses that were numbered were clearly numbered out of order. The 3rd house was next to the 6th, the 1st to the 12th. It couldn't help but drive her crazy. While Gia was getting acquainted with the Konoha real estate market, the village woke up. There were significantly more people. The merchants had already pulled their carts out onto the street and were patiently waiting for the first customers. Today is October 10th. I need to get to the cemetery. I shouldn't forget to buy flowers. It's good that I have a gift for my brother with me. The girl thought, carefully examining the houses. Where is this house? The last word was spoken out loud. Lost in thought, Gia didn't notice how she bumped into someone. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Kakashi? She exclaimed in surprise. Gia. Kakashi breathed out. I'm glad to see you. You've changed a lot. Yes, that's what happens when you don't see someone for several years. She noted irritably. Mom, I really should have visited you more often. Kakashi said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. I promise to improve. I'm leaving on a mission tomorrow, but I'll definitely stop by the orphanage afterwards. You won't find us there anymore. We're moving. Gia looked at Kakashi carefully. They hadn't seen each other for a couple of years, and she didn't expect to see him again. Are you moving? Where? Does the third one know? Of course he does. Who would give me Naruto without his permission? I'm currently looking at apartment options. By the way, do you know where the 17th house is? Not far, but you're going the wrong way. Come on, I'll show you. By the way, why are you alone? Where's your brother? He'd be interested in seeing the options. He'll be living there too. He's interested. But he ended up in the hospital. What's wrong with him? Kakashi asked sharply, turning to Gia. Got into a fight. Probably older kids were involved. Result, broken arm, mild concussion and hypothermia, she answered automatically. Anger was boiling inside her. Why was he suddenly so interested in their lives? He had only been to the shelter twice. Hypothermia? Where from? I found him in the basement when I returned from the mission. And where were the teachers? I'm curious myself. It's good that we won't go back there again. Gia answered indifferently. She still didn't believe that she was actually talking to him. That's right. We've arrived. Thank you for seeing me off. She smiled politely. Good luck. Beaten. Of course, Gia said he got into a fight, but the word beaten is much more appropriate. Who and why could beat a child? There is only one explanation: the Nine Tails. Kakashi thought, walking along the streets of Konoha after parting with Gia. Yes, he knew that Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, but unlike many villagers, he was not afraid of him and understood that there was the fox the demon, through whose fault many died, and there was Naruto the sunny boy, so similar to Sensei Kakashi. Hatake had looked after Gia and her brother all these years and knew that this attitude extended to her as well. He carefully asked Gia's teammates and the third about her progress and was very happy. What was especially admirable was that none of the fourth Hokage's children were embittered towards the villagers for their disgusting treatment of them. Sure, Kakashi could have been closer to them, but every mission he went on could be his last, and he did not want to cause pain, beating, and frostbite. If Gia had returned from the mission a little later, no one would have noticed. Then everything could have ended much worse. Such neglect of the child's health is unacceptable. With these thoughts, he headed towards the residence. I understand your anger, Kakashi. I have already assigned someone to look into this situation, the third said to the angry Anbu. But I know how you can help. How? There are more dangers for Naruto outside the shelter, and not just from the villagers. Many villages dream of getting hold of the tailed beast. A child is an easy target, so I want to assign him Anbu escorts. I ask you to be one of them. And Gia? She's strong and talented for her age. I think she'll soon become a jonin, but she still lacks experience. Plus, she can't be around him 24/7. I agree. The copyist nodded. Then pick 3 more people to help you. Try to make sure that all 3 treat the boy at least neutrally. You will be on duty in pairs, one shift 12 hours. You are the commander. Follow him closely. Is that clear? Yes, Hokage-sama. Free. Gia arrived at the hospital a little later than she had planned. Clutching the bundle tightly in her hand, she tried to sneak into her brother's room as unnoticed as possible, as visiting hours were drawing to an end. When she entered the room, she saw Naruto struggling to remove his cast. You know that the bandage must be removed by a doctor? Sis, it's really in the way. I can take it off myself. Have you looked at the apartments? Will I go with you tomorrow? Will I be discharged soon? What's that you have? Naruto started talking quickly. Gia laughed and ruffled his blonde hair. Let's start from the very beginning, okay? Naruto nodded. The doctor will remove the cast when he deems it necessary. I'll talk to him a little later and find out when you can be discharged. Secondly, yes, I looked at apartments. We'll look at them together tomorrow. Agreed? Naruto nodded rapidly. And last but not least, do you remember what day it is today? Naruto shook his head. Gia sighed heavily. Of course, how would he know? No one at the shelter congratulated us on our birthdays. Most likely, he doesn't even understand why I gave him gifts. We'll fix that. Today is October 10th. Your birthday! With these words, Gia handed him a package wrapped in bright orange paper. Is this for me? Naruto glanced at the package in surprise. He's a monster. He's not entitled to a present. Who else? I don't see any other birthday boys here. Gia placed the bundle on the bed and pushed it towards her brother. Naruto took the box with shaking hands and slowly began to unwrap the gift. After a couple of minutes, he pulled out a kite, a child's kunai, and shurikens. You always wanted a kite, didn't you? When you're discharged, we'll definitely go to the park and try to fly one. And kunai and shurikens. You'll be going to the academy soon. Naruto threw himself on Gia's neck, interrupting her. Thank you? They were interrupted by a knock on the door. Yes? Gia turned to the door. I knew I'd find you here, Hiruzen said as he entered the room. What do you have there, Naruto? A birthday present from my sister, he answered quietly, staring at the snake. A kite, huh? I used to fly one of those when I was a kid. By the way, I have something for you too. With these words, Hiruzen handed the boy a small box of chocolates. Just don't eat them all at once, okay? Happy birthday! Thank you. Naruto answered almost inaudibly and took the sweets. The Hokage turned to Jia. The doctor will examine your brother, and you and I will wait outside the door. The girl followed Hiruzen. Moving slightly away from the door, he asked, Why is Naruto so quiet? It's not like him. He's just not used to gifts. Jia shrugged. I see. How is the apartment search going? I've already ruled out most of the options. I'll tell you for sure tomorrow. Good. Now let's talk about your missions. Your brother needs supervision, which automatically means that long missions are not an option for you. Whatever the reason, I can't let you sit idle. We need everyone right now. You've studied medical jutsu, right? Yes. The village lacks medical ninja. Many died during the Kyubi attack, and we lost some after. Training one takes too much time, which we don't have. Besides, not everyone is suited for this job. Do you want me to? Yes, your chakra control is amazing. I believe you should improve your skills and become a medical ninja. You will be trained at the hospital, and there will be occasional field missions. In addition, I expect you to pass the Jounin certification within a year. Any questions? Does this mean that after receiving the title of Jounin, I will go on long missions outside the village? I don't doubt your intelligence, but even Tsunade had to study for several years before becoming a medical ninja. So you won't be getting any long missions for another 2 years. Is that clear? Yes, Hokage-sama. Great. Let's get back to your brother. After talking to the doctor and learning that Naruto could leave the hospital tomorrow afternoon, Jia began entertaining her brother with stories about the apartments they had seen and listening to his fantasies about what he wanted in his room and how fun it would be to fly his kite in the park. And again, with all this talk, they fell asleep before they knew it. Jia's morning began with an urgent call from the Hokage. She found the third one on the roof of the residence. You wanted to see me? Yes, do you remember that we discussed ANBU security? Certainly. Then I won't torture you for long. Hatake Kakashi has been appointed commander of the security detachment. Jia felt Kakashi land behind her, but she didn't turn around. I want the two of you to discuss the apartment's security, and Kakashi will provide me with a plan for approval by tomorrow evening. Any questions? No, Hokage-sama. The subordinates answered in unison. Great. Jia, they're expecting you at the hospital today. You'll be back on duty in 4 days. You're free to go. They settled in a tree not far from the residence, and had been throwing out possible options for security seals and other types of traps for about an hour. That's all well and good, said the girl, stretching her stiff neck. But without an exact layout of the apartment, it's just a theory. I agree. The copyist nodded. When will you decide on a location? This afternoon we'll look at the remaining options. I'll know for sure by the evening. Jia closed her eyes tiredly. Good. Are you okay? Why such interest? Hokage-sama spoke about the hospital. And it is unlikely that he was simply reminding you about the need to visit your brother. And you need to know everything, right? What did you expect from ANBU? It turns out there is something unknown to ANBU. Interesting. Jia replied sarcastically. How long are you going to be sarcastic? I'm still senior in rank. Kakashi noted, slightly irritated. Yeah, and 4 years older, I remember, Jia exhaled. And I'm not being rude, I'm enjoying my last hours without supervision. Starting from today, ANBU will know a lot about me. Our task is, Naruto, yeah? But I'll be around most of the time. And don't tell me you won't be recording more than half of my actions. Yesterday you said that I could visit you more often. Your request was heard. The girl snorted and quietly, even for Kakashi's ear, muttered something. Okay, you'll find out anyway. Hokage-sama thinks I'll make a good medical ninja. Now it's time for me to go. Find me when you decide about the apartment. Kakashi called after him. It's your shift in the evening, obviously it will be easier for you to find me. See you? Gia spent several hours filling out paperwork at the hospital, then met her mentor. By a strange coincidence, he was Naruto's doctor, Menma Hanari. A man who, by a lucky coincidence, had not lost anyone in the Kyuubi attack. However, he had seen enough victims of that attack, so his attitude towards the Uzumaki brother and sister was not particularly warm. Gia was able to see this for herself. And last but not least, the doctor said after a long briefing, Hokage-sama said that you have amazing abilities. Frankly, I'm not sure about that. Don't expect any special treatment. Is that clear? Yes, Hanari-san, but I have a counter-request. Which? Neither I nor my brother chose anything that we have now. Our parents died that night too. Of course, this does not give me the right to expect any special treatment. However, I ask you to draw your own conclusions about me and my abilities. And without waiting for a response, Jia asked, when can I start? In 4 days in the morning, the man answered after a slight hesitation. Can I take Naruto? Yes, but come back by lights out. Thank you. Naruto ran ahead, constantly turning around and checking if Jia, who was walking slightly behind, was still there. How far do we still have to go? Is the apartment big? Jia sighed heavily. We're almost there. You'll be able to see everything yourself. Don't run ahead, please. Come on, take my hand. Okay. The boy came up to her and grabbed her palm. But will we have time to see everything interesting? What are you interested in? That's it. Naruto jumped up in anticipation. I didn't see anything except the shelter. You won't be able to see everything today, but I promise you'll have plenty of time to explore everything yourself. Okay, sister. We've arrived. Can you help me find the 15th apartment? Yeah. Naruto ran forward up the stairs. Having crossed the threshold of the second apartment, Naruto immediately declared that he would not watch anything else. Jia agreed with him. It was a stunning apartment, small, but very comfortable, cozy kitchen, 2 bedrooms. Both were bright, with windows and wide window sills. The short distance to the academy was also attractive. Naruto could now visit it on his own, not counting the ANBU escort. Sister, look at this windowsill. You can grow flowers here. Flowers. Only her brother knew about Jia's love for flowers. Kushina taught the girl to plant and grow them, and therefore the image of her mother was closely associated with flowers. Yes, brother. We're home. Since moving in, they not only settled in, but also learned to live together. Of course, most of the responsibilities fell on Jia, who, although not right away, managed to cope with everything. Naruto tried his best to help her, which he did not always succeed in, but nevertheless, he was more independent than most of his peers. Every morning, Jia woke up her brother, fed him breakfast and took him to the preparatory class at the academy, while she went to the hospital. When classes were over, Naruto went home for lunch and then to the playground, where he played at least a little with the other children. In the evening, she picked him up from the playground and they went home. There were no other people in their lives. No, of course, Naruto tried to find friends among other children, of whom there were more at the academy and on the playgrounds than at the orphanage. He never found any friends, but he had many playmates, which was good news. Things weren't much better for Jia. Torn between her duties at home, Naruto, and the hospital, she couldn't find any time for anything else. This is how they lived until a certain point. It had been 3 months since Naruto and Jia had started living separately. It had been an exciting and tiring time for both of them. For the first time in many years, they had the right to build their own lives. They determined their own sleep and rest schedules, chose how to furnish their apartment, or what to cook for dinner. Despite this, it was difficult for Jia. People looked at her askance in the hospital, headquarters, and Hokage Tower. No one dared to directly confront her. Everyone knew that the third would simply not approve of such behavior. But looking askance and not talking was entirely within their power. The only people who communicated with her were her teammates and sensei. They did not have a strong friendship, and even they often carried out missions outside the village, but sometimes they got together. Oh yeah, and there was Kakashi, who caught her eye way too often. But Gia just didn't want to talk to him. He had been a recluse for many years and rarely initiated communication. But somehow he had made some friends. Despite this, he had no great desire to make more connections. After Minato and Kushina's death, this desire disappeared completely. It took Hatake more than 3 years to recover. Over these few years, he had only visited the orphanage a couple of times. He was afraid of spoiling the sensei's children with his darkness. And so he kept an eye on them from afar. And a couple of times, it was he who informed the Hokage about how unfairly the Uzumaki siblings were being treated. And then he just ran into Gia on the street and decided to become Naruto's A&BU guard. And what he saw was not to his liking. It was no secret that the villagers were not happy to see both Uzumaki. But the openly hostile looks from the other shinobi were alarming. Such a lack of friends could not please anyone. Kakashi could tell from his own experience that such things did not end well. But Gia refused all attempts to establish communication. Gia spent little time at the cemetery. She could have visited more often, but she didn't think it was necessary to disappear there for days. But today was Minato's birthday, and she simply couldn't not come. She looked at the cemetery in the morning, hoping that no one would be there, and she was right. The kunoichi didn't know how long she stood right in front of the grave. There were no words or tears. Only an unhealed wound and many memories. Kakashi appeared closer to midday and slowly approached the girl. She was too absorbed in herself and did not notice the newcomer. "Hello?" Hatake greeted, attracting attention. "Hello?" Uzumaki nodded and turned towards the exit of the cemetery when she felt a grip on her hand. "Gia, let's talk," Kakashi asked, looking at the back of the girl's head. "Let me go," Gia said demandingly, turning around. "Only if we talk." But the girl pulled her hand out of his grip and wanted to go around him, but he stood in her way. "Let me go," Gia repeated stubbornly. No, Hatake was not going to give in. Certainly not in stubbornness. "I won't talk to you." "Then we're stuck here for a long time." The copyist shrugged indifferently. His calmness literally drove Gia crazy. "I don't need your help." Uzumaki made another attempt to get around him, and once again ran into a wall in the form of Hatake Kakashi. "You're not the first one to go through this, and I know how it could end." Kakashi looked at Minato's grave. "You shouldn't run away from your grief. Minato-sensei wouldn't want." "Don't tell me what he wanted. He's dead. He's not here." Gia finally broke down and screamed, feeling her heart beat faster. All the barriers the girl had built up over the years collapsed in one moment. There was a persistent feeling that she couldn't cope. It became harder to breathe. Uzumaki fell to her knees. Her throat burned with every attempt to breathe. It seemed that air was not entering her lungs. She did not hear Kakashi calling her name. She did not feel his hands unbuttoning her vest, giving more freedom to her chest, and the copy sister himself sat down, placing the kunoichi between his knees, and hugging her. "Breathe," he said into the girl's ear. "Gia, breathe." He took a deep breath, urging her to breathe with him. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Gradually, the girl's breathing returned to normal. "Everything will be okay. Everything is okay." They hadn't really talked much since that meeting at the cemetery, but Gia had stopped avoiding Hatake. This Kakashi was different from the one he had been when they were kids, but he was still an important part of her life. So she had finally forgiven him for all those years he had been gone. On a normal Wednesday, everything started normally. Gia woke up, made breakfast, and woke up her brother. After feeding him, she walked Naruto to class. The day went on as usual, the traditional examination of hospitalized patients, filling out papers, studying the material for the operation, where she was assigned to be an assistant. The usual rhythm of life was disrupted by a passing nurse. "Uzumaki-san, you are expected at the academy." Urgently. Nothing good was expected from being called to the academy. Naruto was disliked there and sometimes neglected, which led to the boy making strange mistakes in simple exercises. All these mistakes were corrected by Gia herself. Entering the principal's office, she saw a strange picture. Against the far wall were 3 boys older than Naruto. They were maybe 7 or 8 years old. All 3 were badly beaten. Against the opposite wall stood Naruto and another boy. A bit dark-skinned, with dark hair pulled back into a ponytail. Both looked shabby, but not as beaten as the first 3. There were 2 people standing by the window, the director and, obviously, one of the senseis. "Good afternoon," Gia greeted. "Good morning." The head of the academy turned to her. "As you can see, we have a small problem. Your brother beat up 3 young men, and in connection with this we are forced to raise the question of punishment. We would not like to resort to extreme measures." "Are these extreme measures?" "An exception." The director spread his hands. "Considering your brother's previous misdeeds. Let me clarify, Naruto fought 3 boys, right? But there's another one." Gia tried to remain calm. "Yes, Shikamaru took Naruto's side. More precisely, he tried to break up the fight. So it turns out that my brother provokes and gets into a fight with 3 boys who are twice his age and several times his size. Shikamaru tried to break them up, right?" "Exactly. Since it was your brother who started the fight, you should understand what this means. If 3 near-genins were beaten by 2 boys who had just turned 4, then you need to reconsider your training methods." A voice came from behind Gia. "Shikaku-san, we were expecting your wife to come." The academy director looked surprised. He clearly hadn't expected the Jounin captain to personally respond to the summons. "Shikamaru and my son too. Why shouldn't I come?" "Sure, let me bring you up to speed." "No need. I accidentally heard a short version of events from Jikun." "And what do the boys themselves say?" "To tell the truth, you haven't interviewed them yet? Then we have a good opportunity to do it now." "Shikamaru?" Gia only now realized how much Shikamaru resembled his father. He sighed heavily and spoke reluctantly. "Yeah, it was pretty much like that, but then the elders came to us and started calling Naruto names. He tried to leave, but they wouldn't let him." Shikamaru ran his fingers through his hair and closed his eyes. "I thought 3 against 1 wasn't fair, so I decided to help." "Naruto?" Gia called her brother to hear his confirmation or denial. He looked up from his gaze at the floor and nodded briefly. The director of the academy sighed heavily. "What did the 3 of you need in the younger group? Did you decide to boost your self-esteem at the expense of the little ones? This Uzumaki, he doesn't deserve anything else. One of the older boys spoke furiously and raised his head, but met Gia's gaze and fell silent. Clear. Gia knew Shikaka Nara. He and his wife had visited the 4th family before the Ninetales attack. They were not close friends, but Gia remembered that her father always spoke warmly of the eldest Nara. The girl herself liked him very much. When the Naras came to visit them, Shikaka would sometimes separate from the adults and spend some time with Gia. He taught her how to play shogi, answered the children's questions. Gia enjoyed such visits. The news that Yoshino and Kushino were pregnant brought them closer together. Everyone believed that their children would definitely be friends, and joked that Gia would have not 1, but 2 younger brothers. After Minato and Kushina's death, they never saw each other again, but Gia didn't blame Shikaku and Yoshino. The village was destroyed, and she had a small child in her arms. Why other people's orphans? Later, a couple of years after the Ninetales attack, Gia met Shikaka Nara at headquarters. She politely answered all his questions, inquired about the health of his wife and son, and promised that she and Naruto would definitely come visit someday. Since then, such meetings happened often, but Gia never kept her promise. After a showdown in the academy director's office, it turned out that the children were hungry and needed to be fed somewhere. Shikaka said that he knew a good place nearby, and Gia decided not to refuse. The boys walked ahead. Naruto was talking enthusiastically about something, and although Shikamaru did not seem very interested, Gia was sure that her brother was being listened to attentively. She and Shikaku walked a few steps away from the children and remained completely silent until the girl decided to speak. Shikaku-san? Yes? Thank you for standing up for Naruto. The man sighed heavily. You have nothing to thank me for. I merely pointed out the facts. Thanks anyway. Nara nodded, accepting the gratitude. Actually, there is something you could do. Yes? This Saturday you will come to our house. This time you will not be able to refuse me. The girl glanced at her brother again. He looked happy and seemed to have found a friend. The first friend. Perhaps it was time to let other people into their lives. Fine. The rest of the week flew by. Every evening, Gia listened to a detailed and very confused story about what Naruto and Shikamaru had done that day, and that Shikamaru was reluctant to play active games and was often lazy. The boy refused to understand the last word at all. How could he be lazy if there were so many interesting things around? For example, they hadn't swung on that swing yet. This misunderstanding had to be corrected immediately. To be honest, the girl got tired of these stories on the very first evening. They were no different. But Naruto was so happy to have his first friend that Gia simply couldn't ask her brother to stop talking or tell her something else. The main thing was that Naruto was literally glowing with happiness, and she would somehow endure it. Naruto was always reluctant to get up in the morning. Every wake-up call turned into a life-or-death battle. And every morning was accompanied by complaints about how classes at the academy started at 8. The boy used the weekends to catch up on sleep, which Gia never stopped. But this morning was different. Saturday morning began with something breaking in the kitchen. Gia never considered herself paranoid, but the only explanation that came to her mind was that someone had broken into the house. Gia quietly crawled out of bed and went to check her guess. In the kitchen, judging by the sounds, there was either an elephant, a shinobi dropout, or a hyperactive 4-year-old. The last option contained the other two. What's going on? Gia asked, looking around at the mess the kitchen had become. And there was something to see. The entire room was covered in flour, including Naruto and the flowers on the windowsill. The cupboards were open and their contents were standing, lying or scattered on every surface, and Naruto himself was trying to collect the shards of the sugar bowl. He was so engrossed that he didn't notice Gia entering. She sighed heavily and carefully, trying not to step on the shards, approached the culprit. Good morning, Gia said loudly. Naruto fell on his bed in surprise. The girl only hoped that it wasn't on the shards, and looked at Gia in surprise as if he had forgotten that she also lived here. Sister! Are you awake already? Did I wake you up? What are you doing? Gia ignored the last question. I wanted to bake cookies. Alone? Without me? I didn't mean to wake you. I'm old enough to handle this on my own. Let's say. Why do we need cookies early in the morning? We're going to visit. I remember. And? We can't come empty-handed. We'll buy some cookies on the way. But there will be no spirits there. Gia froze, trying to understand what Naruto meant. Did you mean souls? That's what I said. Please. You've already trashed the kitchen, so I have nowhere to retreat, right? Aha. Okay. I know one recipe. But first, you'll go to the shower and wash off all the flour. And in the meantime, I'll clean up the shards. Okay. Naruto shouted from the bathroom. Gia finally looked at her watch. 7 in the morning? Just perfect. 4 hours, a lot of nerve cells, 2 broken bowls, and 1 kitchen cleaning with cookies later. The Uzumaki siblings arrived at the Nara family home an hour later. The door swung open as soon as they knocked. You're just in time, the mother of the family said with a smile. Good afternoon, Yoshino-san. Thank you for the invitation. Hello? Naruto greeted quietly. He was loud and active around Gia, but always lost around strangers, sometimes trying to hide behind his sister. He couldn't be blamed. Most of the adults yelled at him for no reason, a couple even tried to hit him when Ji wasn't around. All of these attempts were stopped by Kakashi, as were Ji's attempts to at least yell at those who had offended his brother. After all, the Uzumaki were known for their short temper. Hello, you must be Naruto? The woman crouched down so that her face was level with the boy's. Waiting for a nod, she continued. My name is Yoshino Nara. I am Shikamaru's mother. It is very nice to meet you. What do you have there? Yoshino nodded towards the container that contained the cookies. These are for you. Cookies. We bake them ourselves. Naruto answered quietly and handed the box to the woman. Thank you, she said, taking the cookie. Shikaka and Shikamaru are waiting. Let's go. Everything was fine. The children ate cookies, the adults discussed the latest village news. Everything was perfect. Gia wondered why she had refused the invitation earlier. And then Naruto and Shikamaru went to the backyard under Shikaka's supervision, leaving the girl alone with Yoshino. An awkward silence fell. He's very similar to Minato. The woman broke the silence. And his character, Moms, Gia finished with a smile. And yet he is a little shyer than Kushina. I thought he was louder. It is difficult for him to communicate with strangers. The villagers are not very well disposed towards him. And it's in vain. He's still a child. An absolutely harmless orphan. After a short silence, Yoshino continued. You've become a great older sister. It's a shame your parents never got to see it. Yoshino sighed. Does he know anything about them? A little. He rarely asks. I think it will change when he grows up. I'm sorry you had to go through all this alone. We should have. No, don't. I understand everything. That time was hard for everyone. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have tried. I'm glad Naruto and Shikamaru were able to find common ground. To be honest, he wasn't keen on making friends before. He said it was too much of a burden. Well, Naruto can't boast of having many friends either. And you? What about me? How is your personal life? Friends? I have trouble with time. Sometimes I train with Kakashi and that's it. The girl smiled. After the incident at the cemetery, she really stopped ignoring the man. Oh my. You and Hitaki. Two shut-ins found each other. We wouldn't mind if Naruto stayed overnight sometimes. Then you'd have time. For what? Anything. You're torn between the hospital and your brother. It shouldn't be like this. You should have at least some kind of personal life. It will happen somehow. Soon there will be certification for the title of Jounin. I must prepare well. Shikaka will help you with that. And I wasn't joking. Every person should have a personal life. And believe me, I will provide you with that. Jia choked on her tea from this statement, and clearing her throat, realized from one look that she had no way out. A couple of months had passed since Naruto had first met Yoshino Nara. Since then, he had grown attached to the entire family, and had stayed overnight with them a couple of times. Jia was grateful, admitting that she still needed some free time and personal space. One day, on one of those weekends, there was a knock on the Uzumaki's bedroom window. Of course, it could only be one person. Yo! Kakashi said, jumping into the room. The Jounin are having a joint training session today. You're invited. The girl blinked in surprise. Only now did she realize that the guy was wearing a standard uniform, only without a vest. Apparently, today was his day off too. Thanks, but I'm not a Jounin. So I don't think I should go there. But you're planning on taking the exam. Kakashi shrugged. It'll be good for you. Of course, there was another reason. Hitaki wanted Jia to expand her circle of acquaintances, and that was the main reason for the invitation. Uzumaki sighed and thought that if things went badly, she would always have time to leave. Okay, give me 10 minutes. Kakashi smiled and ran outside. Jia closed the window and started getting ready. When she got outside, she noticed the copy Nin waiting, leaning against a lamppost, reading his book. He looked up when he heard the girl walk towards him and put the book in his pocket. The two walked silently, step by step, heading to the training grounds. When they arrived at the training ground, Jia saw several familiar faces. Apparently, they were the last to arrive. The first to jump up to them was Might Guy. Rival! You are as true to your habits as always. So don't worry, I saved our turn and the next sparring is ours. Finally, the green beast turned his attention to the newcomer. Oh, little Gia is here. The power of your youth is in full bloom. And where is little Naruto? He's visiting a friend, Uzumaki replied, carefully ignoring the little one address. Of course, she knew most of the people there. As a child, she'd sometimes watched their training. I'll probably step aside so as not to disturb your sparring. I'll watch from the sidelines. Mato smiled brightly and gave a thumbs up. Then you should say hello to the others. As soon as the girl had moved a sufficient distance away, where Yuhi was already waiting for her, Guy instantly became more serious and turned his gaze to the copy ninja. Good job, Kakashi. Chapter 3. A couple of years had passed since the Uzumakis moved out of the orphanage. To be honest, Gia hadn't even noticed how quickly time had flown by. Naruto was growing by leaps and bounds. He was talkative, more self-confident, and less shy around strangers. Of course, he was still wary of the villagers, who hadn't come to terms with the boy moving freely around Konoha. And what a scandal it was when someone saw Gia training his brother! How many times had well-wishers run to the Hokage? A monster shouldn't play with everyone on the playground, go to the academy, the store, and especially not train. It should be noted that such an attitude was spreading less and less to Jiu. Her work in the hospital and on missions was spoken of too well. The communication of both Uzumaki with the Nara clan did not go unnoticed, and Shikaku's authority was indisputable, both among shinobi and civilians. In addition, Kakashi's plan fully justified itself, and the girl found a common language with many shinobi from his class. Naruto sincerely did not understand the reason for such an attitude towards himself. He tried to be friendly with everyone, tried to help and be useful, but received nothing but aggression. Due to the law and the personal prohibition of the Hokage, Gia did not have the right to explain to her brother the reason for this, and all she could advise was to ignore it and be friendly. This did not always work, especially with the sellers. Naruto played pranks on particularly rude people a couple of times, but proving it was problematic. The girl herself told Hitaki about this, hinting that Hiruzen was aware, but did not show any particular interest in the precedent. The prank was a success. Everyone pretended not to know the name of the prankster, and the Uzumaki brother and sister stopped going to that shop. Fortunately, Naruto made friends. The other children, noticing Naruto and Shikamaru's friendship, began to treat the former better. Over the course of a couple of years, the boy's number of friends increased, but Shikamaru was beyond competition. Yoshino carried out her threat and periodically organized dates for her. Kakashi, with whom she communicated the most, looking at the woman's activities, joked that one day Yoshino would organize a wedding for Gia, which the girl herself would be the last to know about. Gia did not share Kakashi's joy and diligently came up with an excuse not to go on another date. To everyone's surprise, Naruto put an end to his beloved sister's attempts to avoid a date. One day, when she came home from work, he sat down next to her and began talking very seriously. Naruto said that they were good together, and that he had the best sister who did everything so that he had a good childhood. Naruto has friends with whom he can spend time, but his sister also deserves good friends and, one day, a husband. Therefore, the boy is not at all against giving her free time and personal space. By the way, if a guy or husband offends a girl, then he will have to deal with her brother. During this conversation, Gia was overwhelmed with conflicting emotions: embarrassment, joy, tenderness, and great sadness. At this moment, she wanted to see her parents nearby more than ever. And no, she is not crying at all, except maybe a little. And so they lived until Naruto's first day at the academy. Naruto was quiet the first night back from the academy. Too quiet. Gia expected him to bombard her with words about his first real day at the academy, but he didn't. Tired of watching him pick at his food, Gia decided to talk to him. "Did something happen?" she asked worriedly. "No," the boy answered quietly, picking at his plate. "You've been silent all evening. This isn't normal for you," Gia said softly. Why don't I know my parents' names? Naruto asked, finally looking up. The girl shuddered. The topic of her parents was taboo. At first, after their death, she couldn't talk about them. It was too painful. Naruto only knew that they were heroes who died during the Ninetales attack. He didn't ask about them often, seeing that this topic was painful for his little sister, and then he stopped asking questions altogether. Gia couldn't name them because of the third's prohibition. Naruto wasn't supposed to know who their parents were until he was 18. The girl categorically disagreed with this, but the Hokage didn't listen to her arguments and left the ban in force. The only thing she could achieve was permission to talk about her parents. Why did you start talking about this? Today at the academy, everyone was talking about their family. I told them about the Uzumaki clan, about you, about my parents being heroes. And I realized that was the only thing I knew about them. And one boy said. He said that they just didn't like me. This boy knows less about his parents than you do. And no. You were a desired, long-awaited child. Gia ruffled her brother's hair. Parents loved us very much. I still feel their love. If you're wondering what your parents were like, their names won't tell you anything. I know a couple of stories you'll like. But before I tell them, you should eat. Gia is 3 years old. Minato opened the door of the apartment and froze on the threshold. He double-checked the number on the door. Suddenly there was a mistake. After making sure that everything was correct, he went inside. I'm home. Dad. A disheveled red-haired girl ran out to meet the man and crashed into his legs. We played hide and seek, and Jiraiya could never find me. She hides too well. And I'm not young anymore. Sensei, don't slander yourself. You're young enough. At least to be spying on women at the hot springs. What happened here? He waved his hands, indicating the mess the two had made in his absence. Perhaps we got a little carried away. A little? Jiraiya! Kushina's angry voice came from the hallway. It seems it's my turn to hide, the man said, disappearing into the haze. Even a Sannin wouldn't risk facing the bloody habanero in anger. Minato sighed heavily and started cleaning. Leaving his daughter with a teacher was not the best idea. After all, 2 children without adult supervision was too much. Gia is 5 years old. In the spacious office, everything is laid out on shelves. Here are the reports for the last week. There are the missions that the Hokage personally issues. In that box over there are unimportant messages from other villages that still need to be answered. The important ones are answered immediately. In the corner there is a sofa, on which sits a little red-haired girl, dressed in a green dress. The girl has already climbed all over the office and was dying of boredom. Yes, Minato had to take his daughter to work. She can't always smash the house, and Kushina has a lot of things to do in the village today, and she simply won't be able to look after the child. And so little Gia, as Jiraiya calls her, is impatient. She runs up to the table and tries to look at the papers, which are folded in neat piles. Noticing something interesting, she reaches for the inkwell. Minato, without looking up from the papers, puts the inkwell on the other side of the table. Dad, when are we going home? Gia asks once again, clinging to the window. Almost everything. The girl climbs onto her father's lap and looks at the paperwork he is filling out. It is obvious that the child does not understand anything, but it is better than sitting alone on the couch. The girl knows that one day they will definitely get home. There they will be met by a hot dinner and warm hugs from her mother. Gia is 7 years old. Knock on the door. Come in. Minato raises his head. Kushina enters the office, leading a frowning girl by the hand. Again? The fourth asks tiredly. Yeah, she got into a fight. 3rd time in a month, Databeni. Minato, influence her somehow, I have no strength. The old abrasions haven't healed yet, and she's already getting into a fight again. And who is she after? Kushina raged. Yeah, who would that be? Minato drawls ironically. Dad, but there was a kitten there, and they wanted to throw it into the river. It was so little, Dad. Then calm down and tell me everything in order. Minato sits his daughter on his lap. You'll let her go. It's absolutely unclear how to manage her. One moment she's a calm and obedient girl, and the next she gets into fights with older children. Don't get so worked up, remember what you were like as a child, Minato says peacefully. I was never like that. Yes, yes, and you were nicknamed Bloody Habanero because of your love for spicy food. Minato teases her with a smile. Mom, what were you like? The girl asks. So, here's what you promise. Now you promise not to get into fights without a good reason. You go home with your mom, and in the evening I try to come home early, and we tell you everything. Is that a deal? Gia nods confidently, her eyes lighting up with excitement and curiosity. Do you promise to behave well? Yes. The restless girl begins to spin in her father's arms. Well done. And I said there was no way to control him. Minato turns to his wife. Gia is 9 years old. The girl's 9th birthday began with the usual feeling that there was someone in the room. She knew what day it was, but the bed was too nice and cozy to wake up. Wake up. Rise, said a female voice. I'll eat the whole cake, a male voice echoed. Reluctantly, Gia opened her eyes and sat up in bed, blinking and squinting from the rays of the sun penetrating through the window. Happy birthday! Came from 2 voices, and on the bedside table she saw a camera. The girl exclaimed loudly and threw herself on her parents' necks. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're glad you like it. Kushina smiled softly. Yeah, you just mentioned the camera 1,000 times, and we thought you'd like it, Minato said with a chuckle, and immediately received a poke from his wife. Oh. Actually, these aren't all the gifts. The woman handed the girl a bundle. Photo album? Yes, because you'll need to put the photos somewhere. Besides, there are already some photos there. And we need to tell you something. Minato began slowly. You'll need to carefully memorize the story behind each photo. After all, you'll be telling them to your little brother or sister. Will I have a brother or sister? The girl exclaimed, jumping on the bed. And when? And what will we name him? And where will he live? And Gia, Kushina said, gesturing that she shouldn't jump on the bed. What makes you think it's him? Even Dad and I. Because it's fair. 2 boys and 2 girls. She's right, Minato said to his wife with a smile and turned to the girl. We haven't come up with a name yet. We'll think about the rest too, but you'll help us, right? Yes. And I'll go to the playground with him, then he won't have to sit in Daddy's office. Hey. My office isn't that bad. Okay, debaters, let's go to the kitchen. We'll have all the time in the world to solve these issues and learn to live as a foursome. And after 7 months, only Gia and Naruto remained. At night, Gia couldn't sleep. Unnecessary thoughts crept into her head absolutely against her will. Tired of tossing and turning in bed, she went for a walk around the village. Without noticing it, the girl found herself on Mount Hokage. She was lost in her thoughts, and didn't know how long she had been sitting there when she clearly felt the presence of someone else's chakra. Insomnia? I'm not the only one, she said, turning to Kakashi and holding out her fist to him. Even without seeing his face, Gia was more than sure he was smiling. It was their game. Frankness for frankness. This game was invented by Hitaki. He didn't like that the previously cheerful and sociable girl was gradually becoming a female version of himself. The death of her parents had a strong impact on her. So Kakashi showed unusual sociability for himself. He began inviting her to joint training or lunches. At first, Gia was silent, but over time he managed to get her to talk. In the last couple of years, at Kakashi's instigation, she began to communicate more with other shinobi of the village, but still did not talk about herself, her experiences. Then Hitaki came up with a kind of game. Each one tells something about themselves. These were funny stories, memories, simple thoughts. Sometimes they told things that made each one feel heavy. Only the truth. For example, they learned that they both had nightmares. Kakashi dreamed of his father, Rin, Obito, the fourth. Gia had bright, vivid, memorable dreams. She dreamed of childhood, Jiraiya, her parents. After such dreams, returning to the real world is torture. But let's get back to the game. Of course, someone always had to start the conversation, but no one dared to share something intimate first. At first they tossed a coin, now they played rock paper scissors. So it was no surprise that when Kakashi saw the fist, he accepted another invitation to play and held out his clenched fist. Gia paper, Kakashi scissors. He sat down on the stone, patiently waiting for the girl to speak first. Naruto asked about his parents today. He asked to name them? You don't. No, of course not. I told him that names don't help us understand what our parents were like, the girl said, not taking her eyes off the horizon. After a moment's silence, she added quietly, I hate lying. You're not lying. Yeah, but I can't name his parents. I can't explain why they don't like him, and I have to come up with excuses for everything. Gia walked back and forth, waving her arms emotionally. I can come up with a couple of excuses for you. I'm looking forward to it. Having calmed down, she returned to her previous place, waiting for Kakashi to speak. I'm not in NBU anymore. What? Gia looked at him in surprise. You heard everything. Maybe it's not so bad, Gia said after a short pause and, not waiting for an answer, continued. You yourself said that you don't always understand the villagers and don't know well what the village breathes. Maybe in the position of an ordinary jonin you will have the opportunity to find out. Maybe so. Following her answer, she heard footsteps, and the next second, a standard jonin vest was thrown over her shoulders. Before Uzumaki could protest, a hand was placed over her mouth. Don't even start. You're clearly cold, and I know you'll refuse to go home. As a Konoha jounin, I can't let my comrade freeze. After waiting for a nod, Kakashi removed his hand and sat down on a rock next to the girl. They sat in complete silence until the morning. Chapter 4. The main advantage and disadvantage of working in a hospital is the lack of long-term missions outside the village. Of course, medical ninjas were sent on missions, but they were rarely long, and most of their work took place in the hospital. The advantage is more than obvious: you don't have to leave the village and your loved ones for a long time. The disadvantage is the loss of real combat skills that every shinobi needs. Gia enjoyed leaving the village. She welcomed any opportunity to visit other villages and add variety to her daily routine. Her current mission was not particularly difficult, and was more of a friendly nature. It consisted of arriving in a neighboring village and exchanging experiences with the local medics. The last evening before heading back, Gia was free and decided to take a little walk and look around the village, because she hadn't had time for this for 2 whole weeks. Looking at the shop windows, Gia wandered around the village mindlessly. Suddenly, a man fell out of a nearby door at her feet, curses flying after him. Gia turned her gaze to the sign that read, Women's Baths. The victim began to slowly rise and muttered something quietly under his breath. When he straightened up to his full height, Gia was 100% sure that she had fallen into a genjutsu. How else could she explain that in front of her stood a man she had not seen for almost 8 years and, frankly, had not expected to see? She froze in shock in the middle of the street. Dear girl, would you like to spend some time in the company of an interesting man? Still in shock, Gia did not immediately realize that they were addressing her. I'm not interested, Jiraiya-sama. Without raising her head, she tried to walk around the man. So you know who I am? A fan of my books, perhaps? Then we should definitely talk. Jiraiya grabbed her hand, not letting her go. Gia raised her head and looked him in the eyes for the first time. The grip on her hand disappeared. Gia? Without saying a word, they sat down in the nearest cafe and, having placed an order, continued to remain silent. What are you doing here? Jiraiya finally broke the silence. Mission. Tomorrow I'm leaving for Konoha. The man just nodded. There was definitely no conversation going on. Where have you been all this time? The initial shock was wearing off. She was slowly boiling. I traveled. I collected material for books. And in 8 years you didn't have time to come to the village? To write a letter? Jiraiya sighed heavily. Gia, you have to understand. I wanted to. I really did. But it was hard for me to accept your parents' deaths. When I found out, I didn't believe it. It was too hard to go back to the village after that. It was impossible to even think about looking at you and your brother. You promised your father. Irritated, Gia didn't notice how she switched to you. Once, in another life, she addressed him only like that. To take care of you, if that happens. You're too young to understand. Living in Konoha, seeing you and your brother. It all reminds me of the mistakes I'm trying to forget. I knew your parents very well, cared about them, grew attached to them. I wasn't in the village when they died. If I had been there, I could have, Jiraiya sighed. When they asked me to take care of you after their deaths, I didn't think that day would ever come, much less so soon. But I've always been worried about you and your well-being. Not very noticeable. It's a little more complicated than you think. I listened to you, now it's my turn to speak. Gia interrupted him sharply. I was 9 when I was left alone with Naruto in my arms. At first, I expected you to come and at least take care of him, but then I just stopped even hoping. We lived in an orphanage where no one cared. Where is your concern for our well-being here? I can't explain. Then there is no point in continuing this conversation. With these words, Gia stood up from the table and left without saying goodbye. The girl woke up early in the morning and, trying not to think about the previous evening, began to check whether she had collected everything. After checking for the 100th time that she had all the medical records, the scrolls copied for study, and her personal belongings, she set off. As soon as she left the village, she felt the presence of strangers. However, they clearly did not want to be discovered. Pretending to be deeply engrossed in her own thoughts, Gia began to carefully study the area. The feeling of being watched wouldn't go away, but she was obviously alone on the road. Pretending to adjust the clasp on her shoe, Gia crouched behind a bush and, using the substitution technique, began to wait. She didn't have to wait long. A few minutes later, kunai were flying towards the clone. The fake Gia disappeared. Noticing where the kunai were thrown from, she threw a kunai with an explosive seal. Suddenly, Gia felt a strange presence behind her. She quickly dodged the wire they were trying to tie her up with. You're better than I was told. A ninja appeared in front of her, dressed in dark pants and a standard turtleneck. A Hittite with a crossed-out miss symbol was tied around his shoulder. It's a shame I'll have to kill you. The next blow he threw, Gia deflected with her forearm before throwing her own. The enemy avoided all the attacks, dodging forward and back. He moved faster than Gia. He got behind her and tried to grab her head. Gia managed to throw him to the ground. Before she rushed to finish the fight, 2 more missing nin appeared in front of him. One of them used an unknown technique, and many small needles flew at Gia. After knocking them down with a wind elemental technique, the girl began to form seals. Water release! Water bullet! The attack slipped past the newcomers and onto the 3rd missing nin, who was performing hand seals using the cover. After confirming that the jutsu had hit its mark, she turned her attention to the remaining attackers. Having made a clone, Gia returned to the fight. After a series of blows, one of the attackers hit Gia with a kunai, leaving a scratch on her forearm. The clone quickly dealt with his opponent, using Rasengan, and disappeared. There was still one left. The clone disappeared, and the remaining nuke nin, taking advantage of the momentary hesitation, aimed the kunai in his hand just below the heart. Gia dodged, so the blade flew past and, with Gia's help, was sent back towards the enemy. His gaze darted over the girl's shoulder for a second, and she, taking advantage of the hesitation, sharply pressed the enemy to the ground, knocking the kunai out. A sharp blow to the neck knocked him unconscious. Before Gia could finish off the missing nin, a familiar voice rang out. It would be better to deliver him to Konoha. I have a hunch that they didn't attack you out of pure curiosity. Turning around, Gia saw Jiraiya comfortably sitting on the branch of a nearby tree. How long have you been here? How long ago did you put the second one to bed? And you decided not to interfere? How sweet, snorted Gia, looking around the battlefield. You're better than I was told. She looked at the first attacker, thoughtfully drawling. What? The first attacker said so. Why say such things when you're attacking a stranger? Did they want me or my death? Jia sighed heavily. Perhaps you're right. I'll have to hand this one over for questioning. And it would be a good idea to capture the bodies. Very well. Jiraiya jumped down from the tree. Seal the bodies, and I'll carry the sufferer. Where will you take it? To Konoha. Jia, who had been heading towards one of the bodies, turned sharply towards the man. Why? I can carry the prisoner myself. It's less than a day's walk. Even if there hadn't been this skirmish, I would have gone to Konoha anyway. I have responsibilities there that I've been running away from for the past 8 years. Maybe I can fix the situation. They approached the village late in the evening. A couple of hours before their arrival, Jia sent a coded message asking to meet her at the gate, because walking through Konoha with a prisoner over your shoulder was a stupid idea. So it was no surprise that Marino Ibiki and one of the interrogation department shinobi met them at the very gate. Without saying a word and greeting each other with only nods, they headed to the interrogation department. As soon as they left the village gates, this unusual group immediately heard a scream. Sister! Turning to the source of the sound, Jia didn't have time to say anything. A second and Naruto crashed into her, wrapping his arms around the girl's waist. Uzumaki-san will go ahead. Don't be late, Ibiki said. Of course, she said without looking back, trying to get out of the embrace. Too carried away by the process, she did not immediately notice Shikako Nara, standing nearby and clearly laughing at what was happening. Catching the girl's confused look, he hurried to explain the situation. He's been waiting for you since the morning. We could barely convince him that standing at the gate all day was pointless. It's already late. That's why I came to pick him up. I assumed that something had delayed you on your mission. As I see, you weren't bored. From his gaze, Uzumaki realized that the man was very interested in where she had met Jiraiya. Not the most interesting story. But still, I have one more thing to do. Ruffling the boy's hair, who still had his face buried in the girl's stomach, Jia tried to get his attention. Naruto, I really miss you too. I'm fine, really. Maybe you'll let me go. If I let you go, you will go on your important business. Yes, but you know I can't do otherwise. The sooner you let me go, the sooner I'll be back. I'll take him to your home, Nara suggested. And you will help me out a lot with this. Thank you. Jia was almost on time for the interrogation department. As it turned out, Jiraiya insisted on the Hokage's presence, and the girl ran into him right in front of the entrance. When she mentioned the strange phrase that one of the missing nin had accidentally dropped, Jia noticed that the third had cast a questioning glance at his student, and, receiving a nod in response, had frowned. By the time they finished, night had fallen on Konoha. Before heading home, Jia pulled Jiraiya aside. I still haven't asked about your plans. How long do you plan to stay in the village? It's hard to say. I see. She sighed heavily and handed him a piece of paper with an address. This is our address. If you need me, I'm easy to find at the hospital. In case you decide to meet Naruto. You haven't forgiven me, have you? No. Then why? For Naruto. It would be nice if he had another adult in his life who cared. Thank you. Nodding, the girl headed home. As she left the hospital the next evening, Jia wasn't too surprised to find Jiraiya right at the entrance. Good evening. She was the first to greet. Good morning. The Hokage is calling us. Us? Exactly. With these words, the man turned and silently walked in the opposite direction from the residence. Jia stopped in a stupor. Isn't the residence that way? She called out to Jiraiya. I didn't say we were going there. Follow me. The man replied and waved his hand, urging them to follow him. So you don't plan on meeting Naruto? Jia asked, catching up with the hermit. Maybe tomorrow? Let's discuss it later. Okay. They walked in silence to the former ANBU catacombs located on the outskirts of the village. Hatake Kakashi and Shikako Nara were walking towards the same catacombs from the other side. They drew level just before the entrance. Greeting them with only dry nods, they went inside, where the Hokage was waiting for them. You probably don't understand why I gathered you here and not in the residence. The thing is that everything you hear here and now must not reach other ears. Officially, what I'm about to tell you now doesn't even exist. Jiraiya, begin, the third said, lighting his pipe. During my journey, I was not only collecting materials for my books. At Hiruzen-sensei's request, I was searching for information for the village. About a year ago, I learned of an organization called Akatsuki. It consists of S-class criminals. What are they doing? Kakashi asked. Most often they act as mercenaries, sometimes taking on not only missions to eliminate, but also, for example, security. How many of them? The information is very different. From 5 to 10 participants. All from different villages. Identities unknown. It is likely that Orochimaru is one of the participants of this organization. You say they are mercenaries who carry out missions ranging from assassinations to security. Do they have some larger goal in mind? It's unlikely that S-class criminals would be interested in something like that. Shikaka was already beginning to understand where Jiraiya was heading. They are so strong that they hunt for tailed demons. We don't know why yet, but the Nine Tails is on that list. They recently attempted to kidnap the One Tail. He is Naruto's age, knows that he is the demon's vessel, and is quite bloodthirsty. He dealt with the attackers himself, and it wasn't a team of genin that was sent after him. I dare say that Naruto is not up to something like that. Right? The question was addressed to Jiya. That's right. Besides, he's not capable of using the Nine Tails chakra. You didn't try? Jia tried to teach her brother how to control the Nine Tails' power. She asked me for permission, but at that time neither I nor the elders approved of this proposal. The third interrupted his student. I see. In any case, I would guess that we definitely have a couple of years in reserve. It is obvious that they started the takeover from the very beginning. Really? It's easy to capture a nine-tailed fox child. Why would they wait until he grows up and can defend himself? Jiya countered. You're right, but there's one. But they don't know anything about his abilities. They probably only know his name, age, and that he's being raised by his sister. Then they need information, and the easiest way to get it is through you. Kakashi told the girl. Why try so hard? You can just relax and use henge. That's an option, of course. But I need to act like you at least a little bit. Ideally, the real you wouldn't be on the horizon at all. Shikaka said. That's right. Ibiki has finished interrogating the renegade you brought in yesterday. They were hired to kidnap you. There was no talk of you not only fighting back, but also killing the attackers. Hiruzen intervened in the conversation. Excuse me, what attack are you talking about? Kakashi asked. Jiya looked questioningly at the Hokage. The details of what happened on the missions were not disclosed. They've heard enough. Tell me. The village chief waved his hand. After hearing about the attack, Kakashi and Shikaka fell silent, thinking. I have a question. Was our meeting in the village a coincidence? Jiya took advantage of the pause to ask the Toad Sannin. I was planning to deliver a message to the village, but I didn't think I'd meet you. I understand everything. But if everything is so serious, then why don't you want to involve ANBU or Ibiki with the investigation department? Kakashi asked. Even I'm not sure that they don't have agents in the village. Somehow they found out about Jiya's mission and its duration. We informed Shikaku, since he is the Jonin commander, and Naruto spends a lot of time with his son. It's possible that the fact that he is close to the Jinchuriki will become known earlier. And I'm more than sure that he and Kakashi will do everything possible, but they won't let anyone harm the boy and Jiya. Having waited for a nod from both men, Hiruzen continued, If you don't have any questions, then we can move on to the main part. Jiya, Kakashi and Shikaka are looking for those who knew about the mission and could have passed on this information. We also need to review the security system of Uzumaki's apartment, Shikaka's house, and the academy. Jiraiya will help with Naruto's training. Questions? No. Excellent. Report back on progress in 3 days. Everyone is free. Jia, stay behind. The men bowed and left. The village chief was in no hurry to start a conversation. Hokage-sama? She called. Exhaling smoke, the old man looked thoughtfully at Jia. You're angry with him, and that's understandable. But he never gave a damn about you. He rarely contacted me, but each time he did, he was interested in your life. He spent last night trying to convince me to tell you about Akatsuki. I didn't and don't approve of this idea, but even Jiraiya himself can't be more stubborn than Jiraiya. It's up to you to decide, of course, but you could give him a second chance. Life is too short for resentment, especially the life of a shinobi. I'll think about it, Hokage-sama. The next day came too quickly for Jia's taste. After the meeting yesterday, she found Jiraiya and invited him to their home. From the moment she woke up, Jia was in a state of nervous excitement, which was completely unusual for her. Glancing at the door and the clock, she almost burned her breakfast, almost broke her favorite cup. The situation was saved by Naruto waking up and spilled tea twice. When she spilled tea for the second time that morning, Naruto, who was not known for talking in the morning and only silently watched this action, asked, "Did you sleep poorly?" "What?" "No. Why do you think that? You spilled tea on yourself twice. You never spill anything. And you keep looking at the door. Are we waiting for someone?" Well. When did you become so observant? A good ninja has to notice everything that happens," Naruto said loudly. "And if I want to become Hokage, I have to notice more than everyone else." "Yeah, at this rate you'll be Hokage sooner than I thought," Jia snorted. Before she could elaborate further, there was a knock at the door. As expected, Jiraiya was behind the door. "Good morning. Am I not too early?" "Good morning. No, come in. I just didn't have time to warn Naruto. Would you like some tea?" "If you suggest." Nodding, Jia led the man into the kitchen, where Naruto was fidgeting impatiently. "Naruto, meet Jiraiya. He's your boyfriend?" Jia choked on air. She hadn't expected such a suggestion even from her brother. The man was obviously stunned and looked at her in shock, but he decided to ask. "Why did you decide so?" "My sister never introduced me to her friends. And she was nervous all morning. I would be nervous too if I introduced my brother and boyfriend." "But you're too old for her." "What?" Jiraiya's indignant cry was probably heard by all of Konoha. Trying not to laugh, Jia hurried to explain the situation. "No, Naruto. He's not my boyfriend. He's," the girl hesitated. Why didn't they discuss how to introduce Jiraiya to the boy? An acquaintance? A friend? A godfather? "Your father's sensei. When he was a genin, he ended up on my team," Jiraiya said, realizing the reason for the hesitation. "Really?" The boy was delighted. He was always interested in any information about his parents, no matter what it was. Suddenly his gaze became puzzled. "But where have you been all this time?" The man glanced at Jia for a hint. She just shrugged and placed a cup of tea in front of the man. "I was on a long mission, traveling a lot. Now that I have some time, I decided to drop by Konoha. I thought that since I'm here, I should visit the children of my favorite student." Jia rolled her eyes. She had already anticipated the flow of questions from her brother, but she chose not to interfere in the dialogue between these two. "Was Dad really your favorite student? Did you have many students? Did you often go on missions with them? What is his chakra nature? When are you leaving? Will you train me?" The boy chattered, forgetting to take a breath. Jiraiya chuckled softly as he noticed Naruto's revival. "I don't know when I'll leave. But while I'm here, we could practice together. You don't mind, do you?" "No." "What are you going to teach me? And when are we going to train? Can my sister come with us?" "Yes, I would like to invite Jia with us. As for the time, will today suit you?" "Yes." The boy raised his fist and jumped up from his chair. "Training with my father's sensei will help me get closer to becoming Hokage, Databeo. Can I get ready?" He looked questioningly at Jia and, after waiting for a nod, immediately ran out of the kitchen. The man looked at Jia in shock. Did I hear right? He wants to become Hokage? Yes. Since he was 4, that's all he talks about. It's probably something hereditary. Sannin smiled. It must really be so. Jiraiya frowned in displeasure. Naruto's taijutsu skills were not bad. Not brilliant, of course, but his level was a little higher than expected at his age. But ninjutsu. Even the word, terrible, hardly fits here. You know, he said to Jia, watching the boy throw kunai. When you said he had problems with chakra control, I thought you were exaggerating. Now I understand what you meant. Welcome to the club. Jia sighed heavily. He's taking too much of his chakra. And the fox's chakra is getting in the way. And what he takes seems like a trifle to him, although for us it's quite a lot of chakra. Jiraiya nodded understandingly. How are things going with the creation of clones? No way. With his chakra reserves, he could create a shadow clone right now, but academy students are forbidden from teaching this. I'll talk to the Hokage. It seems that in Naruto's case, this is the only option. In the meantime, I have a couple of ideas for training chakra control. With these words, he headed towards Naruto. Jiraiya spent the next week training with Naruto, only occasionally collecting information for his books. To his credit, the boy's chakra control did improve, and the third half-heartedly approved of the idea of teaching him how to use shadow clones. Naruto had become very attached to Jiraiya and spoke about him with delight. A couple of times he invited Shikamaru to train, who, although he said that it was problematic, still used the opportunity. On Jiraiya's last evening in the village, he sat on the roof across from the Uzumaki house and watched the residents of one particular apartment. You know you can say goodbye to them in person, came a voice from behind the man. Who said I wasn't going to say goodbye to them in person? Jiraiya replied, turning to the newcomer. This is quite your style. Naruto will be very upset, and Jia will be furious. In this way, she is very much like her mother. Jiraiya exhaled. But I'm glad I decided to look into Konoha. You've grown a lot, Kakashi. Rumors of the copy ninja have spread far beyond the village. I heard that you are no longer in ANBU. Yes. I think it will do you good. A cheerful glint lit up Jiraiya's eyes. I heard that you are quite close to my goddaughter. I hope I don't have to warn you about what will happen if you hurt her. Hatake looked at the man in surprise. I think she's capable of standing up for herself. In any case, there's nothing between us, Jiraiya-sama. Jiraiya laughed loudly. Of course, he didn't believe him. In order to avoid giving ground for rumors, the farewell to Jiraiya took place in the apartment of the Uzumaki brother and sister. Do you have to leave? Naruto asked quietly. He had really enjoyed spending time with the man, and so he was very upset to learn that Jiraiya had decided to continue his journey. The Toad Hermit patted the boy on the head. Yes, Naruto, but I promise I'll come visit you often. Smiling warmly at the child, he turned his attention to his sister. I want to give you something. With these words, he handed her a small package. This is something I found in a very distant village. The girl looked at the scroll in surprise. This is the seal of the maelstrom? Yes. I plan to come in and out of the village for a while, but I've been thinking for a while that it would be nice to find an apprentice to teach me what I know when I have a free minute. If I die without passing on my knowledge to someone else, everything I learned from Uzumaki, the village of whirlpools, will be lost forever. I'd like to teach it to you. Agreed.